Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today we're embarking on an exploration that, well, it goes beyond just personal growth. We're asking a truly monumental question. Is humanity as a whole, sort of, on the precipice of a profound spiritual evolution? We're talking about nothing less than a new Earth. A radical shift in global consciousness. For this deep dive, we've really plunged into Eckhart Tolle's transformative work, A New Earth. Awakening to Your Life's Purpose. It's his follow-up, of course, to the hugely acclaimed The Power of Now. But you know us, we never stop at just one source. To really get our heads around the breadth and depth of Tolle's vision, we've brought together, well, quite a stack of wisdom. From all over, really. We've got ancient spiritual texts like the Upanishads and the Cloud of Unknowing. Then there are modern psychological insights from authors like Brené Brown and Marianne Williamson. And critical social commentary from James Baldwin, even scientific perspectives from Richard Dawkins. It's a truly eclectic mix, you see, all aimed at illuminating this singular, really powerful idea.
Right. And our mission today is basically to extract the most important nuggets from these incredibly diverse sources. We want to understand Tolle's profound analysis of the collective human ego, that often invisible yet deeply pervasive force behind so much conflict, greed, and suffering in our world. We'll explore his inspiring vision for a future defined by a collective shift in consciousness. What would this shift truly entail? How would it manifest, in our daily lives, individually and as a species? And maybe most importantly, what could it mean for you as you navigate this evolving landscape?
It's an ambitious journey, definitely, but one we think is absolutely essential for understanding our present and maybe shaping our future.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's really dive into the heart of humanity's potential for awakening. We're talking about a transformation of self and society on a scale we haven't really seen before. Ready?
The ego, humanity's collective shadow.
Okay, let's start right at the core. Tolle's definition of the ego, it's a concept, many of us think we understand, but he presents it in a way that's, well, it's both accessible and deeply challenging. He doesn't label the ego as inherently wrong or evil, which is, I think, a really crucial distinction. He sees it more as fundamentally unconscious. It's not our true, essential self. It's a thought form, basically. An elaborate, often deeply ingrained story we tell ourselves about who we are. And what's really striking is the suggestion that when you just observe the ego in yourself, when you catch it in action, maybe even, with a smile or a gentle laugh at its absurdity, you're already beginning to transcend it. The powerful insight he offers is that the ego isn't personal. It's not actually who you are. In fact, he warns that if you consider the ego to be your personal problem, well, that's just more ego playing its game, trapping you in its narrative. It's a collective thing, like a delusion, a kind of inherited software that humanity's been caught in for a very, very long time.
That distinction is absolutely crucial, isn't it, for anyone trying to genuinely get Tolle's framework. The ego isn't some fixed intrinsic part of your being that you need to annihilate or fight against. Instead, think of it more as a collection of learned patterns, mental constructs, conditioned reactions, less like a core identity and more like a sophisticated, though unconscious, operating system, developed for survival, probably. When we mistakenly identify with it, when we take its pronouncements, its anxieties, its sense of superiority or inferiority, or its reactions personally, we unwittingly feed its power. We give it energy. This challenges our very fundamental understanding of self. It suggests that our default mode, that insistent I thought form, is often just conditioning, not our authentic essence. And realizing this can be incredibly liberating. It means you're not condemned to be identified with these fleeting thought patterns. You can actually step back, observe them.
That's a really radical thought, isn't it? The idea that the very thing we often identify with as me, my personality, my self-criticism, my insecurities, my pride, isn't actually us. I'm curious, what are the practical implications? If I genuinely grasp that, if my inner critic, for instance, isn't me, what does that actually change day to day?
Oh, well, that's where the real transformation starts, isn't it? Genuinely understanding that the ego isn't your true self allows for an immediate, profound sense of detachment. So when you hear that inner voice of criticism or you feel that surge of defensiveness, instead of saying, I am anxious or I am angry, you can start to notice, there's anxiety arising within me. Or, okay, the ego is reacting right now. This creates space, a space between you, the observer, and the egoic thought or emotion. And in that space, you gain choice. You're no longer compelled to just act out those unconscious patterns. It also fosters compassion, not just for others, but for yourself too, because you realize your struggles aren't failures of your essential being. They're just the workings of a conditioned mind. It's really the first step towards not taking your thoughts and emotions quite so seriously, recognizing them as transient phenomena, not defining truths.
And this idea of the ego being fundamentally unsound, maybe even a kind of pervasive illusion, it resonates so strongly with insights from texts like A Course in Miracles. That text describes the ego as fundamentally insane. Why? Because it teaches that you are not what you are. It's a whole system of thought built on a basic error about our identity. And this contradictory teaching inherently creates internal division, doesn't it? Constant conflict. It prevents any true peace or unity inside us.
Precisely. A Course in Miracles takes Tolle's idea of unconsciousness maybe a step further, labeling it insane. Because its core premise, that you're separate from your true unified self and separate from others, is just inherently false. And this lie about our identity makes it impossible to achieve true internal peace while we're clinging to it. It just manufactures conflict and scarcity constantly. What's treacherous to the ego, things like seeking inner peace, recognizing our shared holiness, acknowledging our true spiritual nature, is actually your friend. Because those actions dissolve its power. They lead to genuine well-being. The ego, by its very nature, actively works against our deeper peace by creating and reinforcing this false, fragmented sense of self. It thrives on this internal conflict, pushing us away from our true nature into, well, a perpetual state of striving and dissatisfaction. 1.2 Manifestations of the ego in individual and collective life.
Okay, so if the ego is this unconscious thought form, this kind of collective insanity, how does it actually show up? How do we spot it in our daily lives? Individually and maybe in the wider world. Tolle gives us a really striking, almost funny, everyday example, the illusion of ownership. We point to a huge skyscraper or a fancy car or even just a cherished object and we proudly say, that building is mine, I own it. But what does that really mean when you strip away the legal stuff, the social agreements? Tolle explains it's just a story where the thought form I and the thought form building merge in our minds. If everyone agrees with your story, you're wealthy. If not, you're delusional or a liar. It brilliantly shows how the concept of ownership is just that, a mental concept, a story we agree on or don't.
And this concept of ownership is way more pervasive, and maybe more insidious, than just physical stuff. We extend this mind idea to almost everything, don't we? My opinions, my experiences, my political views, my partner, my kids, my identity. We create these mental constructs of mind that become the root of attachment, expectation, and ultimately suffering. When someone challenges my opinion, for instance, the ego feels personally attacked. And the inherent fragility of these stories, the fact that their validity often depends on others agreeing or on external validation that just highlights how illusory they are. When that agreement disappears or those possessions are lost or relationships change, our ego-driven sense of self can feel really threatened really fast. It underscores how precarious that ego-based identity is. It's always investing in external forms for a sense of security, which is inherently unstable.
That makes total sense. So the ego isn't just about what we have, but what we think and believe and who we sort of identify with. Building on that, Don Miguel Ruiz in The Four Agreements describes a really powerful internal mechanism that feeds the ego constantly, the inner judge. He says, this judge uses what is in our book of law to judge everything we do and don't do. And every time we do something that goes against the book of law, the judge says we are guilty, we need to be punished, or we should be ashamed. It's this relentless, often brutal, internal critic, always holding us to some impossible standard.
Right, in this book of law, he talks about that's really our internalized belief system. It's the collection of agreements, rules, expectations we've soaked up since childhood, from family, culture, religion, society. And this constant self-judgment, this internal conflict, it sets us up to suffer for nothing, as Ruiz puts it. We punish ourselves for perceived failures, for not measuring up to these often arbitrary standards. But what's even more profound is how this individual egoic pattern meshes into a collective dynamic. Ruiz suggests that humans are addicted to suffering at different levels and to different degrees, and we support each other in maintaining these addictions. That's a really stark observation. It means, for example, if you have a deep-seated, maybe unconscious need to be abused, you'll likely find yourself in situations and relationships where that need gets met. It perpetuates the cycle. So the ego doesn't just create individual pain, it actually co-creates and perpetuates systems of suffering with others. It reinforces these patterns in communities, even whole societies.
Wow, that's a really uncomfortable truth to sit with, isn't it? That we can be addicted to suffering and even co-create it. Which leads us to think about what happens when our very natural human emotions get tangled up in this egoic trap. Conversations with God offers a really profound insight here. It explores how the ego twists our inherent emotional experience and how that leads to deeply destructive outcomes when our natural feelings get repressed over and over again. The text argues that natural emotions, which are meant for guidance and connection, when they're continually repressed, they actually mutate. They become unnatural reactions and responses. For instance, natural fear. It's designed to signal danger, prompt caution. But when it's repressed constantly, it turns into panic. And panic leads to irrational violence, widespread wars, even the downfall of nations. Similarly, natural love. It's meant to connect, to uplift. But when it's repressed, denied its true expression, it transforms into possessiveness, which causes similar devastation in relationships, communities, even international conflicts.
The profound implication there is that the ego, mainly through societal conditioning, teaches us to suppress these fundamental human feelings. Often this suppression is taught by well-meaning but equally conditioned parents and caregivers, people who were themselves taught to repress their emotions. And this process generates what the text calls unnatural reactions and responses that aren't just personal struggles. They have devastating collective consequences. Think about historical examples: nations going to war out of panic, fueled by fear-mongering, or countless conflicts born from possessiveness in relationships. The source even suggests that often the wrong people are doing the parenting, meaning those who themselves were taught repression. And they pass it on, so they perpetuate these destructive patterns across generations. This really highlights how the collective ego gets passed down, literally generation by generation, through unconscious conditioning, creating this cascade of pain and dysfunction. It paints a picture of humanity trapped in a cycle of emotional repression that just manifests as widespread suffering.
It feels like a cycle that's almost inescapable sometimes. And Brené Brown's research, especially in the gifts of imperfection, adds another really crucial layer to understanding the ego's operation, particularly through shame and its close accomplice, perfectionism. She points out that shame loves perfectionists. It's so easy to keep us quiet. It's that insidious inner voice whispering we're not good enough, that we need to be extraordinary, flawless, constantly achieving just to be worthy of love and belonging. And Brown issues a powerful warning that really drives home the ego's destructive nature. If you trade in your authenticity for being liked, you may experience the following: anxiety, depression, eating disorders, addiction, rage, blame, resentment, and inexplicable grief. These aren't minor things. These are deeply debilitating conditions born from trying to be something we're not, just to satisfy the ego's hunger for external validation.
Absolutely. These egoic drives to be extraordinary, which he also mentions in Daring Greatly, often spring from a deep underlying sense of inadequacy. It's an attempt to soothe the ache of being too ordinary. It's the ego's desperate plea for significance, for proof of worth. And the collective emphasis on external validation, achievement, perfection, constantly reinforced by social media, advertising, cultural norms, it just fuels this shame. It creates a pervasive sense of disconnection among us. We're all trying so hard to present these perfect facades that we can't genuinely connect. This egoic struggle to appear just right prevents authentic connection and ultimately causes more profound pain, reinforcing our isolation. What's fascinating here is how this makes Tolle's idea of the ego being not personal. Well, it makes it feel intensely personal through the lens of shame. Shame gnaws at our individual sense of self-worth and belonging, yet it's a collective phenomenon. It shows how the ego can cloak itself in these deeply individual, painful narratives that keep us isolated from our true selves and from each other, making us believe our shame is uniquely ours, when actually it's a shared human experience driven by these collective pressures. 1.3, the scientific and social counterpoints to the ego.
Okay, now, just to offer a bit of a contrasting perspective to Tolle's more spiritual and psychological view, let's look at science for a moment. Richard Dawkins, in Dawkins' God, Genes, Memes, Watchmakers, and Delusions, posits a biological basis for what he terms selfishness. He argues, and it's pretty central to his work, that we and all other animals are machines created by our genes. In fact, a predominant quality to be expected in a successful gene is ruthless selfishness. He's basically suggesting that at the very root of our being, there's an inherent drive for self-preservation and replication coded right into our biology.
This presents a really interesting tension, doesn't it? Tolle argues the ego isn't who you are, it's unconscious, a construct you can transcend. Dawkins, though, suggests a more inherent, maybe even evolutionary, quality of ruthless selfishness, right down at the genetic level. So it raises an important question for our deep dive. If our self-serving nature has a biological imperative, this deep drive for survival and replication, how does that intersect with the idea of transcending the ego? It pushes us to consider maybe even if we shed the mental constructs of individual ego, could there still be deeper biological selfish drives influencing our actions and collective behavior? It's not necessarily a flat contradiction, but it adds a layer of complexity. It suggests that while our conscious identification with the ego can be transcended, those fundamental biological drives might need to be understood and integrated, perhaps through conscious choice and wisdom rather than just repression. It shows that the new earth might not be about eradicating all forms of self-interest, but maybe transforming how that self-interest is expressed, moving from unconscious drive to conscious choice.
That's a crucial distinction. Not ignoring our biology, but becoming aware of it and choosing how we engage with it. Now, moving beyond the scientific, James Baldwin, in The Fire Next Time, provides a stark, absolutely crucial reminder of how collective egoic structures perpetuate immense suffering, particularly through systemic racism and deeply ingrained power dynamics. He writes with such raw, visceral clarity about the experience of Black people in America in his time, noting, "It was absolutely clear that the police would whip you and take you in as long as they could get away with it, and that everyone else would never, by the operation of any generous human feeling, cease to use you as an outlet for his frustrations and hostilities." Quote, he continues, "Neither civilized reason nor Christian love would cause any of those people to treat you as they presumably wanted to be treated. Only the fear of your power to retaliate would cause them to do that." This isn't just about individual prejudice, is it? It's about an entire system built on egoic power.
What's truly fascinating and sobering, here's how Baldwin's powerful observation highlights that the collective ego, manifested through systemic oppression and injustice, it can render individual acts of Christian love or well-intentioned individual shifts almost completely ineffective. He's basically saying, even if some individuals genuinely tried to operate from a place of love, the sheer force of the collective ego ingrained in laws, institutions, social norms would just override those efforts. He provocatively states, "The white man's heaven is the black man's hell," illustrating how one group's perceived progress, comfort, or well-being can be directly built upon and even require the suffering of another. So this isn't just about individual awakening. Baldwin argues that radical structural change and even the threat of a collective assertion of power by the oppressed is needed to dismantle these collective egoic power structures. It really challenges the simplicity of individual transcendence. It suggests that a new earth also requires confronting and actively dismantling the externalized, institutionalized forms of the collective ego. Personal transformation is essential, yes, but it might not be enough to address suffering that's deeply embedded in the social fabric. Collective action is also vital.
Baldwin's experience also points out how the ego, in its collective, oppressive form, creates what he calls criminal power. A power that commands fear, sure, but not genuine respect. Yet in the midst of this profound injustice, he offers a paradoxical, really profound insight. He suggests that surviving such persistent cruelty forces one to look beneath appearances, to develop an unshakable authority, an inner strength that can't be taken away. It implies a kind of forced awakening, where intense adversity strips away the superficial.
Indeed. And this offers a deeply paradoxical perspective. Suffering, however horrific and undeserved, it can, if survived and processed, be a powerful, albeit brutal, catalyst for deeper self-discovery and shedding illusions. It's not that suffering itself is good or sought after, obviously not. It's that intense adversity can strip away the superficial egoic identity. It can force one to connect with an inner, unshakable authority, a core resilience. This aligns with many spiritual paths that emphasize transformation through adversity, where trials lead to a profound stripping away of the inessential, revealing a deeper truth about oneself and life. It means that the very systems of oppression, while evil in their manifestation, can inadvertently forge profound inner resilience and clarity in those they target, empowering them to rise above and look beyond the superficial narratives of the ego. It's a testament, really, to the human spirit's capacity to find inner freedom, even when outer freedom is denied.
The path to individual awakening transcending the ego.
Okay, moving from the nature of the ego, both individual and collective, let's talk about the path of liberation. Tolle suggests a very direct, very accessible way out of the ego's prison, connecting with the inner body. He describes it not as the physical body itself, but as life energy, the bridge between form and formlessness. He encourages us to make it a habit to feel this inner body, to sense the vibrant life within us. He emphasizes that when you're in touch with it, you're no longer identified with your temporary physical form or even your constant stream of thoughts. This, he says, is moving away from form identification toward formlessness, which we may also call being. It is your essence identity, profound shift in self-perception. And quite practically, he says, it strengthens the immune system and the body's ability to heal.
This practice, connecting with the inner body, it's a fundamental doorway out of ego identification. Why? Because it anchors you firmly in the present moment, in the now. The ego thrives on dwelling in the past or projecting into the future, right? But the inner body grounds you in the immediate, tangible experience of being alive right now. It moves your awareness away from the incessant chatter of the mind, away from the superficial identification with physical form, towards a deeper, more fundamental essence identity, pure being. Think of it like like a ripple on the surface of a vast ocean, suddenly realizing it is fundamentally the ocean itself. That underlying ocean is what Tolle calls formlessness, or being, your true essential identity, beyond any labels or appearances. By doing this, it effectively disarms the ego's power, which thrives on past narratives and future anxieties. It makes you present to the only reality there truly is, this moment. And it's not just a spiritual concept. Tolle links it to tangible physical benefits, highlighting its holistic impact, showing that mind-body connection in action.
That analogy of the ripple and the ocean is incredibly helpful. It makes formlessness feel much more relatable. And this practice directly addresses what Tolle, in The Power of Now, describes as the very root of suffering. He loves the Buddha's simple definition of enlightenment, the end of suffering. He explains that stress, for instance, is caused by being here but wanting to be there, or being in the present but wanting to be in the future, unquote. It's a split, he says, that tears you apart inside. To create and live with such an inner split is insane. The inner body practice, by grounding you completely in the here and now, it literally ends that internal conflict by unifying your experience.
Exactly. The inner body practice is really a practical application of mindfulness, which, as explored in texts like The Body Keeps the Score and Wherever You Go, There You Are, is a key tool for healing trauma and achieving clarity. It involves accepting things as they are without resistance, which directly counters the ego's constant struggle against the present moment. By fully inhabiting the present, by feeling the life energy within you, you bridge that internal split Tolle talks about. You transcend the ego's divisive influence and move towards an integrated, peaceful state. It allows us to process the energy of the moment rather than carrying, blocked energies from the past, as the untethered soul puts it, into our future interactions, which just perpetuates suffering. This practice is fundamentally about reclaiming your presence from the ego's relentless grasp. 2.2, non-judgment and self-acceptance.
Okay, so a crucial step in transcending the ego, something that works hand in hand with presence, is letting go of that constant habit of judgment. Deepak Chopra, in The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, offers a really beautiful, simple practice for this. He draws from A Course in Miracles. The practice is simply stating, "Today I shall judge nothing that occurs." He suggests starting your day with it, reminding yourself throughout the day, maybe gradually extending the time you practice non-judgment. It sounds deceptively simple, but the implications are pretty profound.
This practice is profoundly effective because it directly disarms that inner judge that Don Miguel Ruiz talked about earlier. When you commit to non-judgment, you consciously quiet that incessant mental chatter, that constant labeling and evaluating everything and everyone. As Chopra explains, this allows us to access the field of pure potentiality, a state of openness, creativity, that's usually obscured by the ego's judgmental filter. It's about a radical acceptance of people, situations, circumstances, and events as they occur in the present moment, without automatically slapping labels on them, good, bad, right, wrong. Instead of struggling against the entire universe by resisting what is, we cultivate an unbiased status like the Yoga Sutras describe. This frees up immense mental and emotional energy that was previously just consumed by internal conflict and resistance. It's about finding peace not by changing the world, but by changing our internal relationship to it.
And this acceptance, it extends not just to external things, but maybe most importantly to ourselves. I found a really powerful passage in the Artist's Way workbook about self-compassion. It's just making this a mantra. Treating myself like a precious object will make me strong. And then it says, we tend to think being hard on ourselves will make us strong, but it is cherishing ourselves that gives us strength.
Yeah.
That completely flips the script on the ego's narrative that we need to be tough on ourselves to improve.
This self-compassion is absolutely vital. Vital for healing the egoic wounds of past failures and for nurturing what the book calls our frightened artist child. That's the part of us that holds creativity and vulnerability, but has maybe been silenced by criticism, internal or external. The ego often convinces us that harsh self-criticism, perfectionism, self-flagellation, that these are necessary for improvement, that they make us resilient. But in reality, that approach just fosters shame, fear, stagnation. It blocks our inherent creativity and our capacity for genuine connection. By cherishing ourselves, by treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding we'd offer a precious loved one, we move away from ego-driven perfectionism towards a place of self-acceptance and inner security. This provides a stable foundation for authentic growth and true strength. It's about recognizing our inherent worthiness rather than constantly striving for external validation, which, as we said, is a hallmark of egoic behavior. It truly liberates us from that treadmill of never feeling good enough. 2.3 Detachment and letting go of resistance.
Okay, expanding on this idea of non-judgment, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali talk about achieving a mastery of his psyche, Kale, and this results in control of his relationship to the smallest atom or to cosmic proportions. Well, now, this isn't about literally controlling the universe with magic, right? It's about cultivating a profound detachment, a lack of interest in the ego's usual pulls and distractions. This detachment allows a yogi, it says, to sidestep most influences and remain in an unbiased status as conferred on him by his yoga practice. It's about becoming kind of untouchable by external ups and downs.
Right. This concept of controlling one's relationship to external forces, rather than futilely trying to control the forces themselves, that's a profound teaching. You find it across many wisdom traditions. It's powerfully echoed in the Untethered Soul, which advises us to let whatever happens make it through you instead of carrying blocked energies from the past or resisting the present. It means confronting situations from a place of clarity and acceptance rather than internal resistance. A yogi, through consistent practice, develops the capacity to observe phenomena, whether it's a difficult emotion, a challenging person, an external event, without getting entangled in the emotional or mental fallout. This practice allows them to preserve their inner peace, their focus. It isn't indifference, mind you. It's a strategic disengagement from the ego's compulsive need to react, control, and ultimately suffer. It's an active choice not to identify with the drama the ego so often creates, and that's how you break free from its grip.
And a similar, maybe even more radical form of detachment is found in that deeply mystical text, The Cloud of Unknowing. For listeners who might not know it, this is a 14th century English spiritual guide. Focuses on contemplative prayer. It describes the practice of putting a cloud of forgetting beneath thee, betwixt thee and all the creatures that ever be made. This is an almost extreme form of renunciation. It covers not just all physical and spiritual creatures, but also all the works and the conditions of the same creatures. It's about a profound detachment from the entire external world and its influences, even from your own thoughts and feelings about them, in order to reach God or pure awareness.
This level of renunciation or radical detachment is also a key theme in Theologia Germanica, another profound mystical text from the 14th century. It states, perhaps a bit chillingly, that nothing burneth in hell but self-will. This emphasizes that the ego's persistent attachment to its own desires, its own separate self-will, is the fundamental source of suffering and spiritual separation. By letting go of this, by emptying oneself of all egoic content and desires, the kind of detachment the Cloud of Unknowing describes, one can attain true light and perfect knowledge. It's about creating an internal void, a profound internal quieting, where the lower operations, passions, and desires of the soul are allowed to just sleep. They no longer hinder the soul's journey towards a higher, pure awareness and union. It's a challenging path, no doubt, but ultimately liberating. It says true freedom comes from letting go of everything the ego clings to. 2.4, embracing authenticity and self-love.
These paths of detachment and non-judgment, they ultimately seem to lead us back to a deeper, more authentic connection with ourselves, don't they? Marianne Williamson, in A Return to Love, really hammers home that true, meaningful relationships with others can only begin with our relationship to ourselves. She says, and it's really a foundational principle for any healthy connection. Your first relationship, therefore, must be with yourself. End quote. You must first learn to honor and cherish and love yourself. You must first see yourself as worthy before you can see another as worthy. It's a powerful statement. It completely challenges that common idea that we can find our worth outside of ourselves.
Yes, it's a powerful challenge to the ego's pervasive tendency to seek worth and validation externally, always looking to others or achievements. If we bypass this crucial step, cultivating self-love, self-worth, any attempt to love others or form what she calls holy relationships will be fundamentally flawed, unsustainable ultimately. We'll just end up projecting our own unacknowledged holiness, our unmet needs, our desires onto others, expecting them to fill the void within us. And when they inevitably fail to live up to these impossible projections, we end up crucifying them, as the text puts it, because they couldn't be who we needed them to be. Conversations with God powerfully reinforces this. It states that the message of true spiritual teachers is never, I am holier than thou, but rather, you are as holy as am I. highlighting our shared divine nature and the importance of recognizing that inherent worth within ourselves first. This isn't selfish narcissism, it's actually the prerequisite for genuine, unconditional love for others.
That makes so much sense. You can only really give what you truly possess inside. And Brené Brown's The Gifts of Imperfection echoes this exact need for internal validation and self-acceptance. She warns that trading your authenticity just to be liked can lead to a whole host of emotional and psychological issues. She lists anxiety, depression, eating disorders, addiction, rage, blame, resentment, and inexplicable grief. These are all deeply debilitating symptoms of an ego struggling desperately to maintain a false self, a persona designed for external approval, rather than embracing who you truly are.
So the path to liberation from the ego, then, profoundly involves shooting these false selves, these carefully constructed personas, and wholeheartedly embracing our inherent holiness and worthiness. It's not about becoming somebody in the egoic sense, achieving external recognition, status, being better than others. It's about realizing who you already are in this vast, interdependent cosmos. As wherever you go, there you are reminds us, our true self isn't our name, age, job, or even our beliefs. Those are just forms, transient labels. Our true self is deeper, an interconnected being, part of something much larger. This journey is about accepting and loving that inherent self, allowing it to be expressed authentically, vulnerably, with compassion. When we do this, it naturally extends to how we interact with the world and others, creating connections based on genuine love and respect, not egoic neediness. It's the foundation for true peace, both within and without.
The collective awakening towards a new earth.
Okay, everything we've discussed so far, understanding the ego, practicing presence, non-judgment, detachment, self-love, these are all really pathways to individual awakening. But Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth invites us to consider something truly monumental, something that goes far beyond just personal transformation, a collective shift in consciousness, moving beyond individual awakening to a spiritual evolution for humanity as a whole. It's a vision that suggests our species isn't necessarily doomed to repeat past patterns of conflict and suffering, but that we have the potential for a profound global transformation, creating a truly new Earth.
Exactly. This vision expands the concept of the individual's end of suffering to a broader species-level transformation. It posits that when a critical mass of individuals transcends their personal egos, when enough people awaken to their true essence, a new Earth, a new state of collective being, a new way of interacting and coexisting can actually emerge. This isn't just a philosophical ideal or some utopian fantasy. Tolle presents it as a potential future for our species. Maybe even a necessary evolutionary leap if humanity is to survive and thrive on this planet. It suggests a future where the current default mode of egoic identification, with its inherent fragmentation and conflict, is recognized as just a transient stage, preparing us for something much more profound, a state of collective interconnectedness and conscious living.
That's such an inspiring idea, yet also incredibly challenging, right? And it resonates strongly with Pierre Teilhard de Chardin's ideas in The Phenomenon of Man. For those unfamiliar, Teilhard de Chardin was a Jesuit priest and paleontologist who tried to synthesize science and spirituality. He spoke to the very possibility of humanity reaching a new level of nature through an evolutionary leap in consciousness. He suggests either the whole construction of the world presented here is vain ideology, or somewhere around us, in one form or another, some excess of personal, extra-human energy should be perceptible to us if we look carefully and should reveal to us the great presence. He's hinting at some kind of inherent guiding force in evolution.
Teilhard de Chardin eloquently describes how, just as physical structures evolve over vast spans of time, so too can nervous systems, and consequently, consciousness itself. He envisions this evolution leading to a quivering spray of foliage in the tree of life, signifying a qualitative leap in complexity and awareness. This excess of personal extra-human energy he talks about, it points to an inherent, almost gravitational force driving us towards this collective shift. It's a compelling idea that suggests this awakening isn't just random, a series of isolated individual events, but maybe a natural, albeit guided, next step in the ongoing evolution of life. The challenge, he implies, is for humanity to become aware of this emergent force, to consciously perceive it and cooperate with it rather than resisting it through our old egoic patterns. It implies we aren't just passive recipients of evolution, but potentially active participants in shaping our future consciousness. 3.2 Interconnectedness and kinship with all beings.
A cornerstone of this collective awakening, and really a core teaching of so many wisdom traditions, is a profound sense of interconnectedness, kinship with all beings. Pema Chodron, the revered Tibetan Buddhist nun in When Things Fall Apart, articulates this beautifully. She talks about how vulnerability, being willing to let our hearts break, leads to this profound sense of connection. She says, "We think that by protecting ourselves from suffering, we are being kind to ourselves. The truth is, we only become more fearful, more hardened, and more alienated. We experience ourselves as being separate from the whole. This separation leads us to our personal hopes and fears and to caring only for the people nearest to us." Then she says, "Curiously enough, if we primarily try to shield ourselves from discomfort, we suffer. Yet when we don't close off and we let our hearts break, we discover our kinship with all beings." It's a powerful argument for just opening up.
This kinship with all beings is indeed the very antithesis of the ego's isolating function. The ego thrives on separation, division, the us versus them mentality. Chodron expands on this by saying that wise, selfish people, I love that phrase, understand that the best thing they can do for themselves is to be there for others. And this paradoxically leads to genuine joy and fulfillment. This completely reframes self-interest. It transforms it from a narrow egoic pursuit into a vehicle for collective well-being and happiness. It's a shift from a limited individualistic perspective to understanding that our personal well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of the whole, the well-being of our community, of other species, of the planet itself. When we open our hearts to the suffering of others, we don't just feel their pain, we also connect to a universal compassion that expands our sense of self beyond the ego's boundaries, making us truly part of a larger living system.
That holistic perspective, it's further emphasized by Eric Fromm in The Art of Loving. He makes it really clear that if love is truly a character trait, meaning a consistent way of being, not just an emotion aimed at a select few, it has to extend beyond our immediate circle. He states, "If to love means to have a loving attitude toward everybody, if love is a character trait, it must necessarily exist in one's relationship, not only with one's family and friends, but toward those with whom one is in contact through one's work, business, profession." He adds, "There is no division of labor between love for one's own and love for strangers. On the contrary, the condition for the existence of the former is the existence of the latter." So a truly loving individual can't compartmentalize their affection. It has to be all-encompassing.
And the Philokalia, that profound collection of texts from the Eastern Orthodox spiritual tradition, reinforces this beautifully, offering a divine perspective. God, who is by nature good and dispassionate, loves all men equally as his handiwork. But he glorifies the virtuous man because in his will he is united to God. At the same time, in his goodness, he is merciful to the sinner. Similarly, a man of good and dispassionate judgment also loves all men equally. This models an unbiased, all-encompassing love that's free from egoic preferences or conditions. This kind of unconditional love extending to both the virtuous and the sinner without judgment. That's precisely the quality required for a collective shift in consciousness. It moves us beyond tribalism, beyond the ego's judgmental filter, into a genuine recognition of our shared humanity and interconnectedness. It signifies a move toward perceiving all beings as part of the same divine fabric, a foundational step for building a new earth where true empathy and compassion can really flourish universally. 3.3. The role of nature and spiritual practices in collective evolution.
So many spiritual traditions, ancient and modern, consistently highlight the importance of connecting with nature as a pathway to deeper consciousness and as a crucial part of this collective awakening. Deepak Chopra, back in the 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, notes that regularly spending time in direct communion with nature enables you to sense the harmonious interaction of all the elements and forces of life and gives you a sense of unity with all of life. It's a simple practice, but really powerful, grounds us in something larger than ourselves.
Absolutely. This communion with nature, whether it's meditating by a stream, walking through a forest, gazing at a mountain, or just observing the intricate pattern on a leaf, it helps us access what Chopra calls the field of pure potentiality. It allows us to recognize the infinite organizing power present in every living thing, the inherent wisdom and interconnectedness of the natural world. This experience expands our individual consciousness beyond the ego's confines. It fosters an ecological awareness that's vital for a collective awakening. It encourages us to see ourselves not as separate from, but as an integral, interwoven part of the natural world, leading to a profound sense of unity and shared existence on our planet. This recognition is critical for overcoming the ego's exploitative, destructive tendencies towards the environment, which have led to so many crises. It's about remembering our place in the grand tapestry of life.
And indigenous wisdom offers such profoundly rich imagery for this kind of collective transformation and our place within nature. In Black Elk Speaks, the sacred text of the Oglala Sioux Black Elk's ghost dance vision, it describes people transforming into elks and bison and all 4-foot beings and even into fowls, all walking in a sacred manner on the good red road together. He prayed, "Guide the people that they may be as blossoms on your holy tree, and make it flourish deep in Mother Earth, and make it full of leaves and singing birds." This vision just transcends typical human identity. It envisions a profound reintegration.
This powerful vision from the Oglala Sioux tradition speaks not just to a personal spiritual journey, but to a radical collective transformation, where humanity reintegrates with the natural world in a sacred, unified way. The imagery of people becoming animals, walking on the good red road together. It's a metaphor for dissolving that egoic separation between humanity and the rest of creation, recognizing the sacredness in all life. The flowering stick and the nation's sacred hoop symbolize the spiritual tools and structures needed for this collective blossoming. A return to harmony and respect for Mother Earth. And the appearance of beautiful butterflies of all colors representing his people, in great difficulty and you shall help them, that underscores the immense challenges, doesn't it? And the desperate need for collective healing and mutual support on this profound journey towards a renewed, harmonious existence. It's a deep spiritual call to action within a vision of interconnectedness, reminding us our fate is truly entwined with the health of the entire ecosystem.
And this collective capacity for spiritual growth isn't limited to indigenous traditions or a few enlightened masters. It's also a core teaching in Mahayana Buddhism, which asserts that enlightenment is available in this lifetime to everyone, not just monks. That greatly expands the scope of spiritual potential. It democratizes awakening, in a way. We see this exemplified in Siddhartha's journey, chronicled in texts like Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha. He left his sheltered, privileged life, encountered suffering, sickness, old age, death, then sought wisdom from a wandering holy man. But ultimately he learned not from external teachers, but from myself, the secret of Siddhartha. And he woke up as a new man by repeating Om and knowing about Brahman, knew about the indestructibility of life. His personal journey became this universal template.
Right. This expansion of enlightenment from an elite few, often those who retreat from the world, to everyone, that's absolutely key to Tolle's concept of a new earth. It implies a collective capacity for spiritual growth, where the individual's awakening contributes to the whole. It raises the tide for all ships, so to speak. The Upanishads, those ancient philosophical texts of Hinduism, describe reaching a state where his desires are fulfilled, with the self as his desire, free from desire beyond sorrow. In this profound state, a father is not a father, a mother is not a mother. It's about transcending conventional egoic identities, relationships, roles, to realize the oneness of Brahman. Brahman here isn't a personal god, but the ultimate reality, the universal spirit. This speaks to a radical dissolution of egoic identification, not into nothingness, but into a greater unified consciousness that forms the basis of a truly new earth. It suggests that the boundaries we perceive between individuals, between self and other, between humanity and nature, are ultimately illusory. And our true nature is boundless, interconnected, divine. This is the profound shift required for a planetary awakening.
Okay, so we've covered individual practices, the collective vision, our connection to nature. To bridge this all back to practical application, the power of ritual highlights how rituals, when consciously adopted and performed, can profoundly stitch into the fabric of your family or friendship and lead to organic growth in nurturing a lifestyle that acknowledges the soul and makes space for connection. This moves beyond just individual solitary practices to shared experiences that can foster collective consciousness.
This is a vital point for collective evolution, I think. It suggests that intentionally designed rituals, even simple ones, like a shared blessing before a meal, a moment of silence for gratitude, a collective practice of mindful walking, can powerfully cultivate collective consciousness. These aren't just personal acts. They create shared experiences that foster connection, reinforce a sense of unity, and align a group towards common values. This resonates deeply with Chopra's law of intention and desire, where intention organizes its own fulfillment when combined with attention, orchestrating an infinity of space-time events. Applied collectively, intentional rituals can profoundly shape the social and spiritual fabric of the new earth. By aligning individual and group attention toward shared values, a deeper sense of purpose, and a conscious co-creation of a more awakened world. They're practical tools for manifesting the new earth in our daily lives. Together. Outro.
Wow. Okay, our deep dive into Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth and seeing how it resonates with so many other profound texts. It paints a really compelling and frankly quite urgent picture. We've explored the insidious nature of the ego, understanding it as this unconscious collective thought form operating both individually and systemically. And we've journeyed through the diverse paths available to transcend it, from those internal shifts like inner body awareness, non-judgment, detachment, to the collective calls for authenticity, self-love, and a profound, all-encompassing interconnectedness with all beings and the natural world.
We've seen how diverse wisdom traditions, from ancient Buddhist teachings and the Upanishads to modern psychological insights from Brené Brown, and even considering the scientific counterpoints and social critiques, they all seem to point toward a similar fundamental truth, that the suffering we experience both personally and globally is largely a creation of our unconscious ego-driven minds, and that liberation lies in shifting our consciousness from identifying with form to identifying with being. The immense challenge, and indeed the great hope, lies in moving from individual awakening to a collective one, confronting not just our personal shadows, but also the deeply embedded systemic manifestations of the collective ego that James Baldwin highlighted so powerfully. It's a journey that demands both rigorous inner work and compassionate, conscious outer engagement.
So what does this all mean for you? You, listening right now, navigating a world that's clearly grappling with its collective shadow, witnessing its conflicts, its divisions, yet yearning for a brighter future. We've heard throughout this deep dive that knowledge is most valuable when understood and applied. It's not enough just to hear these concepts, is it? The real transformation starts with how you embody them.
Right. Which raises an important, maybe final question for you to ponder. If, as Tolle suggests, observing the ego is the first most crucial step to going beyond it, and if, as Conversations with God suggests, your personal relationships are truly holy ground for the evolution of self, how might your intentional presence and mindful engagement in your daily interactions, from the smallest exchange with a stranger to the most intimate moments with loved ones, how might that become a tiny yet potent catalyst for this greater shift toward a new earth? How do you bring your awakened self into the holy relationships of your life, not with the goal of changing others, but with the profound understanding that by changing your own mind, by becoming more present, less ego-identified, you fundamentally change your entire experience and thus contribute in your own unique way to the larger collective unfolding?
That's a profound thought to sit with, and perhaps a potent starting point for your own next steps on this incredible journey. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into humanity's awakening.